Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Cherry Blossom Girls 5 by Harmon Cooper, narrated by P.J. Ochlan. Chapter 1, Junkyard Wars. A screaming comes across the sky. Pynchon couldn't have known the opening line to Gravity's Rainbow would describe Chloe's ability to move through the sky on sound waves. But that was what it sounded like. Earth-shattering, ear-rattling, wince-inducing, death metal concert loud. Our location? An abandoned junkyard in the desert, which does little to answer the question, is there anything Google Face Maps can't find? I swear sometimes that the world's biggest search and social media company has a telepath working for them. Maybe even a team of them. Just a hunch. And speaking of teams, the CBGs were divided into two teams. Well, four of them were anyway. Ingrid and Grace versus Chloe and Michelle. A beast morpher teamed with a psychic shifter to battle a sound manipulator and a super speedster. I currently had Father's healing ability on deck, just in case things got out of hand. To my right was the metal vampire herself, Veronique, along with Fiona, the teenage water user, both of them intensely watching the battle. Stella, the vector manipulator, was also nearby, crouched on the ground as she watched the battle take place. Dorian, my favorite punk rock teleporter, was next to me, her arms crossed over her chest.
"It really is cool that she can do it herself now,"
she said to me, referring to Grace's new ability given to her by the code we'd received from the late Dr. Ken Kim. Sure enough, Grace turned invisible on her own, making it a lot harder for Michelle, who was zipping around like a cracked-out bumblebee, to find her. As with anything, there were parameters to our training battles, one of them being Grace couldn't simply use her nightmare attack to disable her opponents. I'd also started to think of a way to better utilize the CBG's talents in group settings, because this was something that I believed we were missing before. Well, we were missing a lot, but at least we had an overarching strategy: destroy the facilities. Too bad this was more complicated now with the news Dr. Kim had given us about the facilities and other issues in Asia. I swear, just when you think you're about to finish something, when you're seconds away from reaching whatever kernel of truth you're trying to get to, a new angle presents itself, a new foe, and dare I say, a new adventure. Regardless, for now, we were focused on finishing things here in the States. Better to compartmentalize, keep it simple, go with baby steps over giant leaps. "Easy, Grace," I called out as an abandoned refrigerator rose into the air. There were still magnets attached to its front, and scratches up and down the side, like a pissed-off panther had gone after the fridge. Michelle moved out of the way just in time. If I had been filming her and had slowed the film down, I would have seen that Michelle had actually jumped, run vertically up the side of the refrigerator, and flipped backward and landed perfectly. Superhero landing, of course, because if there was anything that these ladies were trained to do, it was superhero landings. The dust from the thrown refrigerator still hung heavy in the air as Ingrid tested out her new power. It was a strange one, and watching parts of her body transform into Tulip, but other parts remain the same, was slightly unsettling. It began with her shoulders, which pressed back, sinewy muscles bulging, veins pulsing, Ingrid's clothing tearing away as her arms grew in length, her hands morphing into sharpened yellow claws that tore out of the skin of her fingers. She grew a couple feet taller, her shoulders stacking with muscles, her skin replaced by muscle and hardened bits of bone that had grown out of the muscle. The only thing that remained in her new form was her face, the edges of which were a meeting point between monster and human, 16-year-old and terrifying beast. The soft skin on her cheeks, forehead, nose, chin, at odds with the tough hide just a few inches away. This new ability was called Beast Armor. While she had Tulip's body, she still had Ingrid's face. And since granting her this new ability through Dr. Kim's code, I'd been trying to come to terms with how it should be used. What I'd come up with so far was that it would be useful for situations in which we needed Ingrid's intellect. Tulip seemed to have a one-track mind, and it was a wonder that he didn't go after us as well after the transformation took place. I still shuddered when thinking about Grace and I coming to our borrowed home in Davis, California, and seeing Tulip tearing through the place. The sheer animosity of an angry Tulip was something that should bring real fear into our future enemy's eyes. Except that Tulip was like a cannonball fired by a drunk guy. With Ingrid's beast armor, she now had more control and could still communicate with the team. Ingrid in beast armor offered just about the most sinister grin I'd seen on the young woman's face. This grin was aimed at Michelle, who stood across from her little fists at her sides. I had purposely set up this bout to be mismatched, wanting to create a true challenge for Michelle, and hoping to see a little bit more of what Chloe could do. The curvy brunette with acoustokinetic abilities was still a bit of a mystery to me, which was why I wanted to test her. Chloe was the newest cherry blossom girl, and I needed to know her limitations, her personal fighting style, and how she worked with others. So far, there had been a little tension between her and Veronique, but that was to be expected, because there was tension between everyone and Veronique, aside from Grace and Dorian. Chloe opened her mouth, and for a moment I couldn't hear anything. Turning off my inner ramblings and tuning out the animalistic sounds of Ingrid breathing allowed me to hear a faint whooping sound. I knew what it was before Chloe dive-tackled an invisible Grace, lifting the psychic shifter into the air and flipping her around so she could drive her back into the ground. This attack would have worked, if not for the fact that as soon as Grace realized what was happening, she used her telekinetic powers to protect her from slamming into the earth. At the same time, she let loose a burst of power that sent Chloe flying into the air, the sound manipulator careening straight into a mountain of garbage. Michelle did as I'd instructed her to do when facing a larger opponent. She zipped around Beast Armor Ingrid, tapping her on the shoulder, offering her a light kick in the leg, slapping her, all in an attempt to tire her out. Ingrid tried to capture Michelle, her clawed fingers swiping at thin air, but everyone watching knew it was impossible. Michelle skidded to a halt in front of a heavy truck tire, latched onto it, even though she could barely lift it, and took off toward Ingrid, stopping just in time to let the tire's momentum carry it forward. Ingrid cried out in pain as the tire cracked into her armored stomach, which sent her tumbling backward into the rusted shell of a car. "Great!" I called to Michelle, who offered me a big, toothy grin. It was a smile of someone getting a compliment from their teacher. Scary, I know, and even though I wasn't technically her teacher, I recognized that smile and understood the feeling that came with it. Stella gave the signal, and Michelle moved over to our vector manipulator, who kept an eye on Ingrid as the young woman used her elbows to press herself off the destroyed vehicle. "Winner Michelle!" I called out. Ingrid blew her dark hair out of her face as I made the announcement. Even though Ingrid was stronger, we were giving that fight to Michelle, both to boost morale and because the speedy super had demonstrated a new idea when it came to using her powers. Accelerating a blunt object to her velocity would be a way for her to actually fight in a battle. I wondered what the limitations were, and just how large of an item she could actually accelerate. When she first picked up the tire, it looked like she could barely hold it, but the act of moving it forward had somehow made it lighter. Since I wasn't a physicist, and since my degree from Southern Connecticut State University hadn't required me to take any physics classes, I was a little in the dark when it came to the weightlessness of an object as it increased its speed. Or however the hell that should actually be stated. But I figured a quick Google face search would clear most of that up. And besides, we were here to test limitations, so there would be a chance to see just what she could lift later. The focus now moved to Chloe versus Grace. Grace had returned her transparency to its normal level, and Chloe was still in the sky, kept afloat by sound waves radiating from the soles of her feet. Both CBGs knew that whoever struck first would dictate the way this fight played out. And my guess was that Chloe would try to hit Grace with one of her sound waves of light, which were pretty awesome, and as we had tested earlier, could cut through solid steel. Instead, Chloe slowly began to lower herself, her brown eyes trained on Grace, as a soft noise emitted from her throat. A barely audible noise, mind you, something I had to strain to hear. Sonic stimulation. It was going to be an interesting test, as her sonic stimulation ability was, for all intents and purposes, a psychic attack. Grace's hands came to the ready, bits of gravel shaking around her, rising and sometimes falling as she fought off Chloe's attack. Her eyes flared with whiteness, practically crackled. "When should we call it off?" I asked Dorian.
"This is why we're here,"
she reminded me. Yeah, but there was a no psychic attacks rule.
"A rule they are clearly ready to violate," said Stella. "So let's see what happens. I'm ready to move in when I need to."
With her short blonde bob and her dark eyes focused on the battle, Veronique licked her lips as Grace lifted into the air. She had been quiet over the last 2 days, since the incident in Davis. I knew she felt ashamed that she had attacked us back in Davis, but I personally didn't blame her, and I didn't think any of the others did either. After all, it was Fiona's motor manipulation skill that had warped her mind, definitely not a conscious choice. Grace's hair began to lift off the back of her neck, pressing up as she floated a foot or so in the air. I had no idea what Grace was hearing at the moment, but I could tell by the strain on her face, the vein bulging on the side of her throat, and the fact that her base form was starting to bubble, losing its shape, that Chloe was winning the battle. A scream pried itself free from Chloe's lips. She hit the ground seconds later, landing in a small pile of old computer monitors. She kept screaming as I ran to her, an explosion of computer parts sending shrapnel into the air. I was narrowly protected by Stella's vector shield, which formed around me at the last minute.
"You have to be more careful, Gideon,"
Stella said, suddenly beside me, swiping her hand away as she rearranged bits of the explosion. I glanced left to see Veronique place her hand on Grace's shoulder, immediately draining some of her life force, and forcing the psychic shifter to let up on her nightmare attack. Chapter 2. Obligatory Stat Dump. A few supplies from Wall Macy's had us covered. As Veronique apologized to Grace for momentarily draining her, the rest of us moved to the base, as I like to call it, which was actually an abandoned building that barely had a roof. The CBGs had used their powers to clean the space earlier, moving away dust with the flick of a hand, or a quick broom run from Michelle, all in an attempt to freshen up the building. It was the stuff that we'd grabbed from Wall Macy's that had helped liven up the place, including a cooler full of ice-cold beverages, snacks, clothing and towels, a couple of foldable camper chairs, and a stack of magazines. A temporary base if there ever was one. All right, remember, we don't hold grudges against each other. Grace?
"I'm sorry, Writer Gideon. I got a bit carried away." "It's fine,"
said Chloe. She was healed now, thanks to yours truly, the only sign of her struggle being a dark smudge on her cheek. Ingrid, Fiona, and Michelle had already gone to the magazines, Ingrid also getting a change of clothing along the way. That was one thing that we constantly had to do with the Beast Morpher, and another reason I was glad we had a near-infinite supply of money, as well as the power to manipulate sales clerks. Keep the clothing coming. Every time Ingrid transformed, she tore all of her clothing off, which was something that was never really covered in superhero comics and movies, something that, ironically, could be considered the mundane day-to-day of someone with extraordinary powers. As Ingrid changed, Michelle chatted excitedly with her, reliving the moment that she knocked Ingrid over with the tire attack. If Ingrid was upset about this, her face no longer showed it. She seemed genuinely happy for Michelle and her breakthrough, as did Fiona, who already was drinking an ice-cold cola through a colored organic straw. We'd been putting it off all day, but it was time to adjust their stats. I also really needed to do some research on the two new supers that had attacked us back in Sacramento, Jules and the one who used gravity. I'd been on the verge of doing it twice now, and with all the people around, I kept getting distracted. Plus, there'd been the emails. I had been writing a lot lately and reading through many more, mostly from people threatening to kill me, etc. I had also written to Father several times, but had yet to receive a reply. But first things first. "Here comes the tedious part," I said aloud, "and I thank you all for your patience while I go through each of your abilities and adjust some things. We'll go over what I adjust, just so there's transparency. Who wants to go first?" Dorian volunteered, and I brought a crate up next to her camper chair. My mini USB cable now out of my pocket, I plugged into her neck, and from there into my phone, noticing that I'd missed a call from Jake Archibald, my eBay Amazon rep. "I'll deal with you later," I thought as I navigated to Dorian's stats. Dorian Gray. Subject DG. Build 7.543. Base height 170 centimeters. Base weight 49 kilos. Strength 2. Intelligence 6. Constitution 7. Wisdom 3. Dexterity 6. Charisma 8. Main Ergokinesis. Overcharge 2. Charge capacity 5. Charge integrity 5. Main second. Teleportation. Telesphere radius 5. Conscious spatial awareness 10. Recharge speed 5. Restoration speed 6. Teleportation rapidity 7. Teleportation distance 10. Empathetic teleportation 6. Banishment 3. Overcharge 1. Some of the CBGs had been gifted a new ability through Ken's code, PH4UL3CR0NK. Others had simply been given more points to work with. 5 points to be exact. The extra numbers were available at the bottom of the screen, and turning the digital dial up adjusted the bonus number. I also had been given something through Dr. Kim's code, oddly enough, but I'll get into that later. Right now it was Dorian time, something I always enjoyed. "Okay, Ms. Dorian, let's see what we can do here."
Ms. Dorian, huh?
"That's right," I said as I started from the top and worked my way down. For Dorian, I increased her telesphere radius by 2, and put the rest of Dr. Kim's bonus points in her ergokinesis ability, bringing her charge capacity up 1 and integrity up 2. Even better, none of this had affected her overcharge, which was always a good thing. "Any changes you'd like?" I asked. To make things easier, Dorian produced a printout of her powers. Of course she knew what her powers were, but this printout showed her their current levels, so she didn't have to remember them.
Let's bring telesphere radius down 1 and recharge speed up 1.
"Good call," I told Dorian as I made the adjustment. "Feel anything?" I asked.
No, feels the same.
"Great." I unplugged from her neck and motioned Grace over. She was out of her body armor and in my house clothes, her long hair pulled into a ponytail, draped over her left shoulder. "Ready?" I asked her. Grace nodded, and Dorian moved so she could take her seat. I plugged in, recalling the first time I'd done so in my basement apartment back in New Haven. Who would have thought that we would end up in a junkyard in the middle of nowhere, Nevada, training supers? From Worcester Square to the Silver State, and everywhere in between. And who would have thought that somewhere in this time, I too would become a super, or at the very least, a mimic? My, how things have changed, I thought, as I briefly glanced over Grace's base stats and moved to her abilities.
I'm proud of you, Writer Gideon.
I'm proud of me too.
Getting cocky now?
Trying not to, but I'm feeling like I'm at the top of my game. I've got a best-selling book, I have superpowers, and it's hard not to rest on my laurels. Hell, we could just retire now and never see these fuckers again.
We really do need our own spot, but we can get to that soon. Maybe even before we take out the next facility. The girls and I want to do some modifications on a place of our own.
I know. But none of you are contractors, and modifications on a place that we've stolen is going to be a bit of a stretch.
Leave the details up to me.
Your wish is my command.
I'm aware, Writer Gideon.
Sabine, Subject S. Build 008. Base height 181 centimeters. Base weight 54 kilos. Strength 1. Intelligence 9. Constitution 4. Wisdom 8. Dexterity 3. Charisma 6. Main Psychic. Omnikinesis 10. Second Sight 5. Psychometry 5. Telepathy 6. Clairsentience 5. Psychokinesis 7. Hypnosis 5. Nightmare Sight 6. Telepathic Radius 3. Main Second. Shifter. Speed of Change 10. Texture Consistency 10. Opacity 10. Transparency Control 10. Voice Match 10. Dr. Kim's code had given Grace 2 new abilities. Her transparency control allowed her to go invisible on her own, and like all of her shifter skills, her power was maxed out, which was an oddity compared to how the others' powers worked. It had also given her a skill known as telepathic radius, which allowed her to communicate over long distances. We didn't know how long, but we'd already tested the distance between our current location in Arizona and our hotel in Malibu. That had proven to be too far, but we'd tried closer distances and that seemed to work. There wasn't really anything to change with Grace, but I asked her if she'd like me to move something around anyway. She'd burned her stats into her memory, which meant she didn't need to look at a piece of paper to make suggestions.
What would happen if you brought my omnikinesis down by 1 point?
She asked. No idea, but let's give it a shot. I did as instructed, and found that I was able to manually adjust the other stats more easily after I'd taken it down a notch. Just 1 point had given me 3 points to work with, which I found out by turning her second sight from 5 to 8.
3 points?
She asked, reading my mind as usual. Where would you like them?
Put 1 in psychokinesis, and 2 in telepathic radius. I need to be able to speak to you over even longer distances. Keep tabs on you.
Definitely, I said, especially with our next plan.
Exactly.
I made the adjustments and looked to the others. Who's next? Fiona lay before me, a spitting image of Ingrid to the point that sometimes they looked like twins. There was a difference in their height and their build, but there was a similarity to the shapes of their faces and the softness of their eyes, and this was saying something considering Ingrid turned into the terrible beast known as Tulip. Fiona, Subject F. Build 9.464. Base height 153 centimeters. Base weight 41 kilos. Strength 3. Intelligence 5. Constitution 6. Wisdom 5. Dexterity 4. Charisma 4. Main Aquakinesis. Hydrokinetic Flight 1. Water Vortex Creation 3. Viscosity Manipulation 8. Tidal Wave Generation 2. Aquatic Adaptation 7. Water Pressure Generation 6. Motor Skill Manipulation 3. Water Negation 4. Morph Speed 9. Water Clone 5. Dr. Kim's code had given her an ability called Water Clone, which she had already tested out a few times. It was similar to Dorian's ability to create a person out of energy, but her water clone seemed to last longer, and it could take directions from her. It was definitely a unique ability, if not a little creepy, especially when the water clone walked and you could see its wet footprints on the ground. Anything you want to change? Fiona looked at a printout of her stats, licking her lips as she considered my question.
It would be cool to be able to fly,
she finally said. Yeah, that would be cool, but we have to take some points off something else. You know, I think that we could pretty much strip down aquatic adaptation, considering we don't ever battle in water. That would free up 6 points. Where would you like to put them, aside from flight?
6 points, 6 points.
She turned to Ingrid and Michelle.
Hey, I have 6 points to use. I need your help. Where do you two think I should put them?
Michelle appeared next to her. Ingrid casually walked over.
I think you should put all the points in flying,
said the youngest CBG.
Because that would be cool.
Let's put 4 points in flying, I suggested. That will leave you with 2 more points to work with. You could put the other 2 in water vortex creation.
Boring.
I laughed at Michelle's comment, and after giving me a confused look, she laughed along with me.
What's so funny?
She finally asked, still laughing. You don't even know what that is.
It still sounds boring. Put it in tidal wave generation,
Ingrid suggested.
Actually, you should bring down your morph speed by 1 point, which should free up another point. Correct, Gideon?
Looks to be the case, I said as I did as Ingrid instructed.
Okay, so 2 points in tidal wave generation,
said Ingrid,
and the final point in motor skill manipulation.
I glanced at Ingrid, remembering just how powerful Fiona's intoxicating ability, which was scientifically known as motor skill manipulation, actually was. It had been powerful enough to take over Veronique's mind, which meant increasing its power could either come in handy or bite us in the ass at some point. Once I was done, Fiona's abilities looked like this. Main, Aquakinesis. Hydrokinetic Flight, 5. Water Vortex Creation, 3. Viscosity Manipulation, 8. Tidal Wave Generation, 4. Aquatic Adaptation, 1. Water Pressure Generation, 6. Motor Skill Manipulation, 3. Water Negation, 4. Morph Speed, 8. Water Clone, 5.
I have to go outside and test this,
she said as soon as I finished up.
I can fly!
Wait, let me do all of your adjustments before you go out.
Come on, Gideon,
Michelle whined.
She can fly now.
Fiona rose into the air about a foot, lost her balance and stumbled forward, caught by an invisible force. I looked to the likely culprits, Grace and Stella. Stella nodded toward Grace. Just wait another minute before you go out, I said. And Grace, please go with them when they do. I turned to the beast morpher. All right, Ingrid, I'm guessing you already know what you want. One thing I had discovered about Ingrid was that she was the savviest of the 3 super teens. She was also the least customizable of the CBGs, which was unfortunate because of her eagerness to play with her abilities. There's not a lot you can do, I started to tell her as I looked over her deets. Ingrid, Subject I. Build 3.2. Base height 150 centimeters. Base weight 40 kilos. Strength 1. Intelligence 3. Constitution 5. Wisdom 4. Dexterity 7. Charisma 5. Main, Beast Morphing. Beast Soul 8. Morph Speed 6. Beast Armor 6.
Bring Beast Soul down by 1 more point, which I'm hoping will generate 2 points, and put 1 in Morph Speed and 1 in Beast Armor.
Are you sure about that? I asked her.
Positive. I communicated this to Tulip as well.
I raised an eyebrow at her. Wait, you can communicate with Tulip? You never told me that.
I can sometimes sense Tulip's thoughts, and sometimes, not all the time, tell him things. He said to do it.
Well, what Tulip asks for, Tulip gets. I did as she instructed, and as she had intuited, bringing down Beast Soul indeed gave her 2 points to work with. Not a lot to change, but Ingrid was happy with the final results. Main, Beast Morphing. Beast Soul, 7. Morph Speed, 7. Beast Armor, 7.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?